Good afternoon, Year 6. We are starting our new book for this term, which is Wonder. So let's give it a go. Oh, one message before we start reading. Please don't watch the film before you've read the book. Mr. Bailey has put you a link up on Dojo. It's a PDF version, or you can order it on eBay or Amazon. You can even get it secondhand for a couple of pounds if it's something that you do want to read at home. So let's have a look. Okay. Part 1, August. Ordinary. I know I'm not an ordinary 10-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I do ordinary things. I eat ice cream, I ride my bike, I play ball, I even have an Xbox. Stuff like that makes me ordinary, I guess. And I feel ordinary, inside. But I know ordinary kids don't make other ordinary kids run away screaming in the playgrounds. I know ordinary kids don't get stared at wherever they go. If I found a magic lamp and I could have one wish, I would wish that I had a normal face that no one ever noticed at all. I'd wish that I could walk down the street without people seeing me and then doing that look away thing. Here's what I think. The only reason I'm not ordinary is that no one else sees me that way. But I'm kind of used to that how I look now. I know how to pretend I don't see that faces that people make. We've all gotten pretty good at it, we've all got pretty good at that sort of thing. Mum and Dad and Vi. Actually, I take that back. Vi's not so good at it. She can get really annoyed when people do something rude. Like, for instance, one time in the playground, some older kids made some noises. I don't even know what the noises were exactly, but I didn't hear them myself. But Vi heard and she started yelling at the kids. That's the way she is. I'm not that way. Vi doesn't see me as ordinary. She says she does, but if I were ordinary, she wouldn't feel like she needs to protect me as much. And Mum and Dad don't see me as ordinary either. They see me as extraordinary. I think the only person in the world who realises how ordinary I really am is me. My name is August, by the way. I won't describe what I look like. Whatever you're thinking, it's probably worse. Why I didn't go to school. Next week, I start 5th grade. Since I've never been to a real school before, I'm pretty much totally and completely petrified. People think I haven't gone to school because of the way I look, but it's not that. It's because of all the surgeries I've had. 27 since I was born. The bigger one happened before I was even 4 years old, so I don't remember those. But I've had 2 or 3 surgeries every year since then, some big and some small. And because I'm little for my age, I have some other medical mysteries that the doctor never really figured out. I used to get sick a lot. That's why my parents decided it was better if I didn't go to school. I'm much stronger now though. The last surgery I had was 8 months ago and probably won't have to have any more for a couple more years. Mum homeschools me. She used to be a children's book illustrator. She draws really great fairies and mermaids. Her boy stuff isn't so hot though. She once tried to draw me a Darth Vader, but it ended up looking like a weird mushroom-shaped robot. I hadn't seen her draw anything in a long time. I think she's too busy taking care of me and Vi. I can't say I always wanted to go to school, because that wouldn't be exactly true. What I wanted was to go to school, but only if I could be like every other kid going to school. Have lots of friends and hang out after school and stuff like that. I have a few really good friends now. Christopher is my best friend, followed by Zachary and Alex. We've known each other since we were babies, and since they've always known me the way I am, they're used to me. When we were little, we used to have play dates all the time, but then Christopher moved to Bridgeport in Connecticut. That's more than an hour away from where I live in North River Heights, which is at the very tip of Manhattan. And Zachary and Alex started going to school. It's funny, even though Christopher's the one who moved far away, I still see him more than I see Zachary and Alex. They have all these new friends now. If we bump into each other on the street, they're still nice to me though. They always say hello. I have other friends too, but not as good as Christopher and Zach and Alex were. For instance, Zach and Alex always invited me to their birthday parties when we were little, but Joel and Emma and Gabe never did. Emma invited me once, but I haven't seen her in a long time. And of course, I always go to Christopher's birthday. Maybe I'm making too big a deal out of birthday parties. I like when Mum tells me this story because it makes me laugh so much. It's a story of how I came to life. It's not funny in the way a joke is funny, but when Mum tells it, Vi and I just start cracking up. So when I was in my mum's stomach, no one had any idea I would come out looking the way I look. Mum had had Vi 4 years earlier, and that had been such a walk in the park, that's Mum's expression, that there was no reason to run any special tests. About 2 months before I was born, the doctors realised there was something wrong with my face, but they didn't think it was going to be bad. They told mum and dad I had a cleft palate and some other stuff going on. They called it small abnormalities. So a cleft palate is where your lip is, you don't have, yes, your mum doesn't, Macy. It's when your lip is sort of stuck to the top, but it can be fixed when you're a child. If you have it as a baby, it's quite easily fixed. There were 2 nurses in the delivery room that night I was born. One was very nice and sweet. The other one, mum said, did not seem at all nice or sweet. She had very big arms, and here comes the funny part. She kept farting. Like, she'd bring mum some ice chips and then she'd fart. She'd check mum's blood pressure and she'd fart. Mum said it was unbelievable because she'd never seen a nurse. She'd never seen a nurse like it, and she never said excuse me. Meanwhile, mum's regular doctor wasn't on duty that night, so mum got stuck with this cranky kid doctor she and dad nicknamed Doogie after some old TV show or something. They didn't actually call him that to his face though. But mum says that even though everyone in the room was kind of grumpy, dad kept making her laugh all night long. When I came out of mum's stomach, she said the whole room got very quiet. Mum didn't even get a chance to look at me because the nice nurse immediately rushed me out of the room. Dad was in such a hurry to follow her that he dropped the video camera, which broke into a million pieces. And then mum got very upset and tried to get out of bed to see where they were going, but the farting nurse put her big arm on mum's mum to keep her down on the bed. They were practically fighting because mum was hysterical and the farting nurse was yelling at her to stay calm, and then they both started screaming for the doctor. But guess what? He'd fainted right on the floor. So when the farting nurse saw that he'd fainted, she started pushing him with her foot to get him to wake up, yelling at him the whole time. What kind of doctor are you? What kind of doctor are you? Get up, get up. And then all of a sudden, she let out the biggest, loudest, smelliest fart in the history of farts. Mum thinks it was actually the fart that finally woke the doctor up. Anyway, when mum tells this story, she acts out all the parts, including the farting noises, and it is so, so, so funny. Mum says the farting nurse turned out to be a very nice woman. She stayed with mum the whole time. Didn't leave her side even when dad came back and the doctors told them how sick I was. Mum remembers exactly what the nurse whispered in her ear when the doctor told her I probably wouldn't live through the night. Everyone born of God overcometh the world. And the next day, after I'd lived through the night, it was that nurse who held mum's hand when they brought her to meet me for the first time. Mum says by then she had told her all about me. She had been preparing herself for the seeing of me. But she says that when she looked down into the tiny, mushed up face for the first time, all she could see was how pretty my eyes were. Mum is beautiful, by the way, and Dad's quite handsome. Vi is pretty, just in case you were wondering. Christopher's house. I was really bummed when Christopher moved away 3 years ago. We were both about 7 then. We used to spend hours playing with our Star Wars action figures and dueling with our lightsabers. I miss that. Last spring, we drove over to Christopher's house in Bridgeport. Me and Christopher were looking for snakes in the kitchen, and I heard Mum talking to Lisa, that's Christopher's mum, about me going to school in the fall. I had never ever heard her mention school before. What are you talking about? I said. Mum looked surprised, like she hadn't meant for me to hear that. You should tell him what you've been thinking, Isabel, Dad said. He was on the other side of the living room, talking to Christopher's dad. We should talk about this later, said Mum. No, I want to know what you're talking about, I answered. Don't you think you're ready for school, Uggy? Mum said. No, I said. I don't either, said Dad. Then that's it. Case closed, I said, shrugging. I sat on her lap like I was a baby. I just think you need to learn more than what I can teach you, Mum said. I mean, come on, Uggy. You know how bad I am at fractions. What school? I said. I already felt like crying. Beecher Prep, right by us. Wow, that's a great school, Uggy, said Lisa, patting my knee. Why not Vi's school? I said. That's too big. I don't think that would be a good fit for you. I don't want to, I said. I admit, I made my voice sound a little babyish. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, Dad said, coming over and lifting me out of Mum's lap. He carried me over to sit on his lap on the other side of the sofa. We won't make you do anything you don't want to do. But it would be good for him, Nate, Mum said. Not if he doesn't want to, answered Dad, looking at me. Not if he is not ready. I saw Mum look at Lisa, who reached over and squeezed her hand. You guys will figure it out, she said to Mum. You always have. Let's just talk about it later, said Mum. I could tell she and Dad were going to get in a fight about this. I wanted Dad to win this fight, though a part of me knew Mum was right, and the truth is, she really was terrible at fractions. Okay, so think about August and kind of what we've learnt about him there. He's supposed to be about 7 years old there, and how he was sat on Mum's knee, and how Dad carried him and sat him on his knee. Okay, so if you think 7 years old, you're looking at about a year 4 child. Yeah, so thinking about how he acts and what he's like. Okay, and that's probably going to have come from the fact that he's never been at school, has he? He's never learned to be independent. Driving. It was a long drive home. I fell asleep in the back seat like I always do, my head on Vi's lap like she was a pillow, a towel wrapped around the seatbelt so I wouldn't drool all over her. Vi fell asleep too, and Mum and Dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but when I woke up there was a full moon outside the car window. It was a purple night and we were driving on a highway full of cars, and then I heard Mum and Dad talking about me. We can't keep protecting him, Mum whispered to Dad, who was driving. We can't just pretend he's going to wake up tomorrow and this isn't going to be his reality, because it is, Nate, and we have to help him learn how to deal with it. We can't just keep avoiding situations that... So send him off to middle school like a lamb to the slaughter, Dad answered angrily. Well, he didn't even finish a sentence because he saw me in the mirror looking up. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I asked sleepily. Go back to sleep, Uggie, Dad said softly. Everyone will stare at me at school, I said, suddenly crying. Honey, Mum said. She turned around in the front seat and put her hand on my hand. You know, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But we spoke to the principal there, and we told him about you, and he really wants to meet you. How did you tell him about me? What did you tell him about me? How funny you are, how kind and smart. And what I told him was that you'd read The Dragon Rider when you were 6, and he was like, wow, I have to meet this kid. Did you tell him anything else? I asked. Mum smiled at me. Her smile kind of hugged me. I told him about all your surgeries and how brave you are, she said. So he knows what I look like? I asked. Well, you brought pictures from last summer, Dad said. We showed him pictures of the whole family and that great shot of you holding that flounder on the boat. A flounder is a fish. You were there too? I had to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was being a part of this. We both talked to him, yes, Dad said. He's a really nice man. You'll like him, Mum said. Suddenly, it felt like they were on the same side. Wait, so when did you meet him? I asked. He took us on a tour of the school last year, said Mum. Last year? So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? We didn't know if you'd even get in, Uggie, answered Mum. It's a very hard school to get into. There's a whole admissions process. I didn't see the point in telling you and having you get all worked up about it if it was unnecessary. But you're right, Uggie. We should have told you when we found out last month that you'd got in, said Dad. In hindsight, sighed Mum. Yes, I agree. Did that lady who came to the house that time have something to do with this? The one who gave me that test? Yes, actually, said Mum, looking guilty. Yeah, she did. You told me it was an IQ test, I said. I know. Well, that was a little white lie, she answered. It was a test you needed to take to get into the school. You did very well, by the way. So you lied, I said. A white lie, but yes. Sorry. Trying to smile, she looked at me. But when I didn't smile back, she turned around in her seat and she faced forwards. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I asked. Mum sighed and gave Dad a look. Does anybody know what it means by a lamb to the slaughter? What they're talking about? Leah? Sort of, yeah. Lamb to the slaughter is a phrase that's been used for a long time, and it's a phrase that means having something very innocent, yeah, go into a situation that is very bad. Yeah, so a situation, so for example, a lamb to the slaughter means to kill. So to take a lamb, a little baby lamb, is very innocent, doesn't really understand, does it? Okay, it would just get into a van, and if you took it to the slaughter, it would mean to take it to be killed. It wouldn't know it was going to get killed. It would go along willingly and happily, without knowing the consequences. So that's what it means. Okay, so leading something innocent, or young or naive, into a situation that is dangerous or bad. So he's saying that basically Uggie is like the lamb. To go into that school, he doesn't know what it's going to be like, and everybody at that school is probably going to look at him or cause him some sort of issue. Okay. Let's have a look. I don't want to go to school, I answered, folding my arms. It would be good for you, Uggie, said Mum. Maybe I'll go next year, I answered, looking out the window. This year would be better, Uggie. You know why? Because you'll be going into 5th grade, and that's the first year of middle school for everyone. You won't be the only new kid. I'll be the only kid who looks like me, though, I said. I'm not going to say it won't be a big challenge for you, because you know better than that. But it'll be good for you, Uggie. You'll make lots of friends, and you'll learn new things you've never learned from me. She turned in her seat again and looked at me. When we took the tour, you know what they had in their science lab? A little baby chick that was just hatching out of its egg. It was so cute, Uggie. It actually kind of reminded me of when you were a little boy with those big brown eyes of yours. I usually love when they talk about when I was a baby. Sometimes I want to curl up in a little tiny ball and let them hug and kiss me all over. I miss being a baby, not knowing stuff, but I wasn't in the mood for that now. I don't want to go, I said. How about this? Can you at least meet Mr. Tushman before making up your mind? Mum asked. Mr. Tushman, I said. He's the principal, answered Mum. Mr. Tushman, I repeated. I know, right? Dad answered, smiling and looking at me in the rearview mirror. Can you believe that name, Uggy? I mean, who on earth would ever agree to have a name like Mr. Tushman? I smiled even though I didn't want to let them see me smile. Dad was the one person in the world who could make me laugh no matter how much I didn't want to laugh. Dad always made everyone laugh. Uggy, you should go to that school just so you can hear his name said over the loudspeaker, Dad said excitedly. Can you imagine how funny that'd be? Hello, paging Mr. Tushman. He was using a fake high old lady voice. Hi, Mr. Tushman. I see you're running a little behind today. Did you get your cart rear-ended again? What a bum rap. I started laughing, not even because I thought it was being that funny, but because I wasn't in the mood to stay mad anymore. Could be worse though, Dad continued in his normal voice. Mummy and I had a professor in college. She was called Miss Butt. Mum was laughing now too. Is that for real? I said. Yep, Roberta Butt, Mum answered, raising her hand as if to swear. Bobby Butt. She had huge cheeks, said Dad. Nate, said Mum. What? She had big cheeks, is all I'm saying. Mum laughed and shook her head at the same time. Hey, I know, said Dad excitedly. Let's fix them up on a blind date. Can you imagine? Miss Butt meet Mr. Tushman. Mr. Tushman, here's Miss Butt. They could get married and have a bunch of little tushies. Poor Mr. Tushman, answered Mum, shaking her head. Uggy hasn't even met the man yet, Nate. Who's Mr. Tushman? Vi said groggily. She had just woken up. He's the principal of my new school, I answered. Paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I'd known I was also going to be meeting some kids from the new school. But I didn't know. As of everything, I was kind of giddy. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Dad had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mum arrived at Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, I saw Mr. Tushman standing there waiting for us at the entrance, and I started giggling right away. He didn't look at all like what I'd pictured though. I guess I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy, tall and thin, old, but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mum's hand first. Hi, Mr. Tushman. So nice to see you again, said Mum. This is my son, August. Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. Hi, August, he said, totally normal. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hi, I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He was wearing red Adidas. So, he said, kneeling down in front of me so I couldn't look at his sneakers, but had to look at his face. Your mum and Dad told me a lot about you. Like, what have they told you? I asked. Sorry? Honey, you have to speak up, said Mum. Like what? I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit I had a bad habit of mumbling. Well, that you like to read and that you're a great artist. You have blue eyes with white eyelashes. And you're into science, aren't you? Uh-huh, I said, nodding. We have a couple of great science electives at Beecher, he said. Maybe you'll take one of them. Uh-huh, I said, though I had no idea what an elective was. So, are you ready to take a tour? You mean we're doing that now? I said. Did you think we were going to the movies? He answered, smiling as he stood up. You didn't tell me we were taking a tour, I said to Mum, in my accusing voice. Uggy, she started to say. It'll be fine, August, said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. I promise. I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mum's instead. He smiled and started walking towards the entrance. Mummy gave my hand a little squeeze, though I don't know if it was a I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze. Probably a little bit of both. The only school I'd ever been inside of before was Vi's. When I went with Mum and Dad to watch Vi sing in spring concerts and stuff like that, this school was very different. It was smaller and it smelled like a hospital. Nice Mrs. Garcia. We followed Mr. Tushman down a few hallways. There weren't a lot of people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all. Though that may have been because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mum as I walked. I knew that sounds kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words Office of the Middle School Director on the door. Inside, there was a desk with a nice seeming lady sitting behind it. This is Miss Garcia, said Mr. Tushman, and the lady smiled. at Mum and took off her glasses to get up out of her chair. My mother shook her hand and said, "Isabel Pullman, nice to meet you. And this is August," Mr. Tushman said. Mum kind of stepped to the side a bit so I would move forward. Then that thing happened that I've seen happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Miss Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast, no one else would have noticed, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling a really shiny smile. "Such a pleasure to meet you, August," she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. "Hi," I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which hung from a chain around her neck. "Wow, what a firm grip," said Miss Garcia. Her hand was really warm. "The kid's got a killer handshake," Mr. Tushman agreed, and everyone laughed above my head. "You can call me Mrs. G," Mrs. Garcia said. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at all the stuff on her desk now. "That's what everyone calls me, Mrs. G. I forgot my combination. Mrs. G, I need a late pass. Mrs. G, I want to change my elective." "Mrs. G is actually the one who runs the place," said Mr. Tushman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. "I'm here every morning from 7:30, Miss Garcia continued, still looking at me while she stared at her brown sandals with the small purple flowers on the buckles. "So if you ever need anything, August, I'm the one to ask, and you can ask me anything." "Okay," I mumbled. "Oh, look at that cute baby," Mum said, pointing at one of the photographs on Miss Garcia's bulletin board. "Is he yours?" "No, my goodness," said Miss Garcia, smiling a big smile, now that was totally different from her shiny smile. "You've just made my day. He's my grandson." "What a cutie," said Mum, shaking her head. "How old?" "In that picture, he was about 5 months, I think. But he's big now, almost 8 years old." "Wow," said Mum, nodding and smiling. "Well, he is absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," said Miss Garcia, nodding like she was about to say something else about her grandson. But then all of a sudden her smile got a little smaller. "We're all going to take very good care of August," she said to Mum, and I saw her give Mum's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mum's face, and that's when I realised she was just as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Miss Garcia when she wasn't wearing her shiny smile. What does he mean by her shiny smile? What do you think he means? Okay, so it means he's met Miss Garcia, and she's like, "Hello, I'm Miss Garcia. How are you?" However, when she's talking to Mum, she smiles like, "Oh, it'll be okay. Things are going to be okay." So what do you think he means by her shiny smile? Yeah? Not quite. He means like her fake smile. It's a smile that she's forcing, isn't it? It's a smile that she's having to force on. Okay, so her shiny smile is the one that she puts on for people when they come into her office and she's like, "Hello, how are you?" Even if she's not feeling particularly happy or great, she'll still have her shiny smile on. So it's not her real smile, okay? It's quite a fake smile. And August can see right through that, can't he? He knows that she noticed his face. She saw Miss Garcia. He saw Miss Garcia drop her eyes. He notices how people react around him, okay? So we've got to make sure that when we're reading this story, we're picking up on all of those clues, because with it being told from August's perspective, we get told things like that quite often. There's lots of inference in wonder. So I think I'll stop there. So we're on page 19 for those of you who are reading at home. If you want to read along or carry on reading, that's absolutely fine. And we will be posting new videos every single day of our book Wonder. Do you want to say hello, goodbye?
Hello. Bye.